"Honey, my mom is moving in with us," Emily said during dinner. "After Dad's death, it's hard for her to be alone." I nodded, not knowing what to say. Margaret had always been the perfect mother-in-law for me, never interfering in our lives, never giving unsolicited advice. Now she would be living with us. "Of course, dear," I finally replied. "We have enough space." Margaret arrived a week later. I helped unload her things and couldn't help but notice how she had changed over the past year. Her usual restraint had disappeared, replaced by a kind of vulnerability in her eyes. But she remained just as elegant. At 55, she looked stunning. "Stephen, you're so kind," she said when I brought the last box to her new room. "I hope I won't be too much of a burden." "Not at all, Margaret. We're happy to have you." The first days were strange. I was used to walking around the house in just shorts. Now I had to watch my appearance. But gradually, we started to adapt to the new arrangement. Margaret turned out to be a perfect housemate. She made amazing breakfasts, kept the house in perfect order, and never interfered in my relationship with Emily. "Steve, try these pancakes," she would say in the mornings. My husband, loved them very much." I noticed these slips, this sadness in her voice, and something inside me responded to her loneliness. One night I found her crying in the living room. "Sorry," she quickly wiped away her tears. "Couldn't sleep." "It's okay," I sat next to her. "Want to talk?" Sometimes it hits me. 40 years together and suddenly, emptiness. I don't know what came over me, but I hugged her. She pressed against me, so fragile and vulnerable. She smelled of some flowers, and that scent made my head spin. "Thank you," she whispered, pulling away. Her eyes sparkled in the darkness. "Any time." My voice sounded hoarse. After that night, something changed. I started noticing things I hadn't noticed before. How gracefully she moved, how melodiously she laughed, how beautifully her hair fell on her shoulders. "Steve, you've been distracted lately," Emily noticed. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, just tired from work." But I knew it wasn't about work. It was about the fact that I was starting to have feelings for my wife's mother that shouldn't exist, and that terrified me. Each day became more difficult. I caught myself looking for excuses to be near Margaret, to hear her voice, to catch that floral scent. "Stephen, could you help me with the shelves in the garage?" she asked one morning. "Of course," I answered too quickly, and Emily raised an eyebrow in surprise. It was stuffy in the garage. Margaret was wearing a light sundress, and I tried not to look at how the fabric hugged her figure. "Could you hand me that box?" She reached up and the edge of her dress lifted, revealing her slender legs. I swallowed. Maybe I should get it. "Don't be silly, I'm not that old yet," she laughed, but suddenly swayed on the stepladder. I instinctively caught her. Her body pressed against mine, and for a second the world stopped. I felt her breathing, the warmth of her skin, the beat of her heart. "Thank you," she whispered, not pulling away immediately. "Any time," my voice trembled treacherously. That evening, I couldn't sleep. Emily was peacefully snoring beside me while I lay there, remembering that moment in the garage, hating myself for these thoughts. The next day, I deliberately stayed late at work. But when I returned, I found Margaret alone in the kitchen. "Emily's at yoga," she said, stirring something in a pot. "Will you have dinner?" "Yes, thank you." We ate in awkward silence. I felt her glances but was afraid to look up. "Is something wrong, Stephen?" "Everything's fine." "You've been avoiding me lately." "No, not at all." "Stephen." She put her hand on mine and a shiver ran through my body. "I'm not blind." I stood up abruptly. "I need to work." In my office, I tried to focus on documents, but her face, her eyes, her lips kept appearing in my mind. "Damn!" I hit the desk with my fist. "What's happening to me?" At night, I heard sounds from the living room again. Margaret was sitting in an armchair with a book. "Can't sleep?" I asked, though I knew I should leave. "Reading." She looked up, and I was lost. In the light of the table lamp, her eyes seemed golden. "What are you reading?" "A love story," she smiled. "Silly at my age, isn't it?" "You're not old," slipped out of my mouth. She looked at me for a long moment. "Really?" I felt my mouth go dry. "Really?" We looked at each other, and the air between us grew thicker. I knew I needed to leave. Right now. "Good night," I forced out and practically ran from the room. In bed, I tossed and turned for a long time, trying to get the image of Margaret in the armchair out of my head, her smile, her gaze. Emily mumbled something in her sleep and snuggled against me. I felt like the worst scoundrel. But even guilt couldn't suppress that other feeling growing inside me each day. I was falling in love with my wife's mother, and there was nothing I could do about it. May turned out to be hot. Margaret started wearing light dresses that made my throat go dry. I tried to spend more time at work, but at home, I still constantly ran into her. "Your shoulders are tense," she said one day when I was sitting with my laptop in the kitchen. "Let me help." Her hands landed on my shoulders, and I froze. She began massaging my muscles, and each touch sent an electric current through my body. "Better?" she asked quietly. "Yes," my voice was hoarse. "Thank you." "Anytime." She removed her hands, but I could still feel their warmth. Emily started staying late at work. She'd been promoted, and the new position required more time. Margaret and I were increasingly left alone. "How about some wine?" she suggested one evening. Emily said she'll be late. I knew I should refuse, but I nodded. We sat on the veranda talking about everything and nothing. In the twilight, her profile looked especially beautiful. "You know," she suddenly looked at me, "sometimes I catch your glances." I felt the blood rush to my face. "Margaret, don't!" She shook her head. "I just want you to know. I feel it too." "What?" "This tension between us, this chemistry." I stood up abruptly. "We shouldn't talk about this." "Why? Because I'm old? Or because I'm your wife's mother?" "Because I go crazy every time I see you," burst out of me. "And I can't, have no right to feel this." She looked at me with wide eyes, stars reflected in them. "Stephen." "No," I raised my hand. "Please, I can't." I went to my office and sat there until night, trying to work. But her face kept appearing before my eyes, her eyes reflecting the stars. The next day, we carefully avoided each other. But in a small house, this was difficult. "Sorry," we collided in the kitchen. She in another summer dress, me, half-dressed after a shower. "It's nothing." She lowered her eyes, but I noticed how her gaze slid over my torso. "Margaret." "Yes?" We stood too close. I could smell her perfume, see the pulse beating in her neck. The sound of the front door opening made us jump apart. "I'm home." Emily's voice brought us back to reality. That evening I stood in the shower for a long time, trying to wash away this obsession, but it wouldn't go away. I was falling more deeply in love, and apparently my feelings were mutual, and that scared me most of all. "Honey, they're sending me to a conference in Chicago," Emily announced at breakfast. "For 3 days." I almost choked on my coffee, feeling Margaret's gaze on me. "When?" I asked, trying to keep my voice normal. "Tomorrow. Sorry for the late notice, it was decided suddenly." All day I was on pins and needles. The thought of being alone with Margaret both terrified and excited me. In the morning, I drove Emily to the airport. She kissed me goodbye while I felt like the worst scoundrel. Returning home, I found Margaret in the living room. She was reading a book, one leg crossed over the other. Her house dress had ridden up slightly, revealing her knees. "She left?" she asked without looking up. "Yes. And now what?" "And now what?" I sat in the chair opposite. "We're adults. Nothing should change." "Really?" She finally looked at me. "Then why are you trembling?" I was indeed trembling, from her gaze, from the situation, from my thoughts. "Margaret, Yes? I can't take it anymore." The words burst out on their own. "I'm going crazy. Seeing you every day, being near you and not being able to..." "To what?" She put down her book and leaned forward. "Touch you." I stood up, walked to her. "Kiss you, tell you how much I..." "Tell me," she whispered. "I've fallen in love with you," I exhaled. "God, how I've fallen in love." She slowly stood up. We stood so close I could feel the warmth of her body. "And now what?" Her voice trembled. Instead of answering, I kissed her, gently, almost weightlessly, giving her a chance to pull away. But she returned the kiss with such passion that my head spun. Her hand slid under my shirt, my fingers tangled in her hair. The kisses became deeper, hungrier. "Stephen," she breathed when my lips moved to her neck. "We shouldn't..." "I know," I mumbled, continuing to kiss her, "but I can't resist anymore." She pressed closer to me. "Me neither." We gave in to passion right there in the living room. It was madness, pure madness, but we both lost our heads. Her moans, her touches, her whispers of my name, everything merged into one dizzying sensation. Afterward, we lay on the couch, trying to catch our breath. "What have we done?" she whispered. "What we've wanted for a long time." I kissed her shoulder. "Emily will never forgive." "I know." I held her closer. "But I don't regret it." "Neither do I." She turned to me. "And that scares me most of all. We spent the next 2 days as if in a fog. We woke up together, had breakfast, gave in to passion, had breakfast again. Reality seemed to cease existing. I feel like I've gotten 20 years younger, Margaret laughed as I kissed her in the shower. With you, I feel desired. You're incredible, I whispered, exploring every inch of her body with my lips. How did I live without this? We barely left the bedroom. Each touch revealed something new. Each kiss felt like the first. Tell me, when did it start? She asked, lying in my arms. Remember that night when I found you crying? Yes. Something changed even then. I was just afraid to admit it to myself. She turned to me. And I fell in love with you when you were helping me move in. You were so caring. I kissed her, and the conversation once again turned into something more. But reality caught up with us unexpectedly. A phone call cut through the morning silence. Honey, Emily's voice sounded excited. I'm coming back today. The conference was shortened by a day. Margaret and I looked at each other in panic. That's wonderful, I managed. Will you pick me up at 6? Of course. After hanging up, I looked at Margaret. She sat on the bed, wrapped in a sheet, looking so vulnerable. What now? She asked quietly. I don't know, I sat beside her. But I can't stop this. I don't want to. Stephen, she's my daughter. And I love you. She shuddered. Don't say that. Why, it's true. Because I love you too. And that only makes everything more complicated. We spent the rest of the day trying to return the house to normal. We cleaned up scattered clothes, changed the bedding, aired out the rooms. Like we're covering up a crime, Margaret said with a bitter smile. Is love a crime? In our case, yes. At the airport, I hugged Emily while Margaret's face stayed in my mind. How would we live now? How could we pretend? I missed you so much, my wife chattered all the way home. How did you manage without me? Fine. I tried to focus on driving, but my gaze kept returning to the rearview mirror, where I could see Margaret in the back seat. At home, Emily rushed to hug her mother. Mom, I hope you and Stephen weren't bored? No, dear. Margaret's voice didn't even waver. Not at all bored. In the evening, when Emily was asleep, I went to the kitchen for water. Margaret was there. Can't sleep? I asked. What do you think? We looked at each other across the kitchen table, and the air between us crackled with unspoken words and suppressed desires. I miss you, I whispered. I know, she took a step toward me. I miss you too. The kiss was quick, desperate. We both knew we were risking everything, but couldn't stop. Mom! Emily's voice from the hallway made us jump apart. Are you here? Yes, sweetheart, Margaret replied, getting some water. I watched her leave and realized we were trapped in our own feelings, and there was no way out. The following weeks turned into sweet torture. We sought any opportunity to be alone. Accidental touches in the kitchen, quick kisses in the garage, meetings at the supermarket under the pretense of shopping. You've changed, Emily noticed one morning. You seem happier. Really, I tried to sound casual. Must be the project at work going well. And Mom, too, she continued thoughtfully. She seems younger, even started wearing makeup. I stayed silent, remembering how I had kissed Margaret's lips the previous evening when Emily was at yoga. We were becoming careless. Passion clouded our judgment, made us take bigger risks. We need to talk, Margaret said after another secret meeting in a motel. This can't continue. I know, I pulled her close, but I can't be without you. What about Emily? I love you. And her. I was silent. The truth was that my love for my wife had turned into habit, into a sense of duty, but what I felt for Margaret was alive, real, burning. Maybe we should leave, I suddenly suggested. Go somewhere far away, start over. And break my daughter's heart? She laughed bitterly. What kind of mother would I be then? Aren't we breaking her heart now by lying every day? At that moment, my phone rang. Emily. Honey, I have news! Her voice sounded excited. Remember I mentioned a promotion? They're transferring me to the main office in Los Angeles. I felt everything go cold inside. What? It's wonderful. New city, new life. And Mom can come with us. I looked at Margaret. She had heard everything. The motel room was quiet. When? I asked, my voice hollow. In a month. I've already started looking at houses. After the conversation, we were silent for a long time. There's your solution, Margaret finally said. Fate has decided for us. No. I took her by the shoulders. I don't want to lose you. And I don't want to destroy my daughter's life, she kissed me. It was a beautiful dream, Stephen, but it's time to wake up. I love you, I repeated, kissing her face, neck, shoulders. Love you. In those last minutes together, we tried to memorize every moment, every glance, every touch. Time seemed to stop, allowing us to say goodbye to our forbidden love that was never meant to have a future. "You know," she said afterward, staring at the ceiling, "they say true love is when you can let go. What if I don't want to be true?" She turned to me. "And if I say yes, if I agree to run away with you, what then? Could you live with the thought that you ruined my daughter's life?" I was silent. She was right, of course. The phone rang again. Emily again. "Honey, I found the perfect house. 3 bedrooms, big garden. Want to see the photos?" "Sure," I answered, looking at Margaret. "Show me tonight." She got dressed and walked to the door. "Wait," I caught her hand. "Is this really the end?" She kissed me, gently, sadly. It was a beautiful beginning, just at the wrong time. I watched her leave and understood. She was right. Sometimes love is measured not by what you gain, but by what you can give up. But part of me knew in Los Angeles there would be other motels, other opportunities, other moments alone. Because such love cannot be killed. You can only learn to live with it. Did you like this story? Let us know in the comments what you liked. Subscribe to our storytelling podcast. Also, don't forget to like and ring the bell so you don't miss more interesting stories. See you soon.